feel free to help yourself to the snacks, and we'll go ahead and get started since we have a time schedule. So the first thing that comes to mind that I think we should talk about, and of course it's with all due respect to the events the past week in Boston, which was a horrific event, but obviously it stands out that video surveillance played a large role in the apprehension of the suspects. But there was an interesting quote from the Boston police commissioner. He said that the department's facial recognition system failed to identify the two bombing suspects, despite the fact that they were in known databases. Obviously, the older brother had been on a watch list, and the younger brother, of course, there were driver's license photos and such. And so the kind of the layman's question is, of course, when I'm at home, like many of us, maybe you use iPhoto or Aperture or Picasa to arrange your photos, or you submit a photo to Facebook and it magically knows who your friends are. The obvious question then is, if the recognition and accuracy is quite good for those home applications, it's almost a commodity, why is it so challenging to apply those same techniques to video analytics in the wild, if you will, where the camera isn't intentionally aimed at the subjects? And I wonder if you can comment on what your thoughts are. And please, we can go right down the road here. Kris.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, that
please speak up.
Technology is always a moving target. So even though the technology is improving, it does not mean that the agencies or the public safety team has access to that technology. It's very unfortunate that when you go from technology to technology, especially in biometrics, it is not as simple as simply switching on a new algorithm. It requires data conversion. There are proprietary formats to encode this. So 10 years ago, this technology was really bad, but today, I think if you look at the recent NIST testing, even with 24 pixels between the eyes and an image compressed to a lower resolution of just 2 kilobytes, the accuracy is over 90%. So this is something was impossible to realize a few years ago. So technology has moved, but that does not mean that that particular technology was available for this particular situation. Some of the companies, like even our company, we offered to help, and we were doing something in the background. But before that, of course, those days were hard and process. So,
I wonder if one possible solution there is if enterprise hosts a video analytics solution, such that you would be able to progress the algorithms as the technology evolves, rather than for customers that, particularly public safety, that have 5 or 10-year buy cycles. And of course, the challenge there, of course, is especially with public safety, the legality of shipping images off to a private firm for analysis, which just seems like a possible solution.
Yeah, globally, some large countries, the approach they have taken is not just to depend on one particular vendor, vendor's technology. So there are countries where we have deployed solution with 2-3 algorithms, so that if something happens, none of these algorithms work exactly the same way. There are different ideas, different techniques behind them. So if one of these can complement each other, we may be able to find. But that, of course, it has revenue implications, cost implications. So not many agencies can afford to pay for 2-3 systems and integrate such solution. But I personally believe it is something that should be done, because if you look at what's happening today, pretty much all of us are carrying smartphones, and so many videos, so many photographs. The amount of media which is available is huge, and of course we have Facebook. So I think it's important for us to look at such investment to make this, make sure this doesn't happen.
Aggelos, you have some thoughts on that?
Sure. I fully agree with my colleague here, but yeah, it's not clear what technology they have available. because it's indeed correct based on these results and so on, that the technology is very advanced. But yet, the second comment is whether the technology has solved the problem in real life. There are all these standard issues with face recognition. Like you change the illumination, you change the pose, you change the scale, you change the resolution, and this and that, and so on. And secondly, some of these have been addressed in the lab. But if maybe you put them all together, plus we have the disguise of the people, right? With the food on the card, the plastic, and so on. So I think it's still a problem that out in the wild has not been fully solved.
Yep.
Yeah, so the NIST results over the last 10 years have been very impressive in terms of the improvement, such that we have very good results. But I think it's important to understand that those NIST evaluations have been done really on constrained face recognition, and the situation we're dealing with in Boston bombing is that you've got more challenging imagery. You don't have a cooperative subject who's looking at the camera. So I think there are other data sets that are out there. Actually, coincidentally, we have analytics in the wild as today's session, right? So there's labeled faces in the wild is one example database that you can do evaluations of face recognition technologies against that. So we've done some looking at that and done some evaluations of face recognition vendors in that area. Whereas the NIST results are like 99% accuracy. You're looking at more like around 80% accuracy on the label faces in the wild. So that kind of gives you a little bit more to report. I think all the points that Aggelos said in terms of the additional challenges, I would especially highlight the resolution and pose as two limiting factors, because usually we saw the pictures on the TV screens, right? They were taken from video cameras from far away and zoomed right in. There was not a lot of resolution on the face, which makes it pretty difficult. And for the most part, they're not looking at the cameras. I didn't see any of the images where they were actually looking at the cameras. They're always off in a different direction. We got the cap on there. So those are challenging things, and in the end, people will look at that.
Jonathan, I wonder if maybe from your perspective you could comment on, if facial recognition wasn't the right analytic here, what analytic might have helped. And I'll read another quote here. The commissioner also said the work was painstaking and mind-numbing. One agent watched the same segment of video 400 times. So I imagine this is almost like a mechanical Turk methodology, where I just have a lot of folks laboriously reviewing these video streams and looking for an anomaly. What's the right balance between an analytic and an officer's intuition?
Well, I think you need both, and I mean the points I've always raised here. The wild for us is thousands of cameras with varying resolution, varying quality. People are not stopping and posing in front of the camera. Some are low definition, got different lighting conditions. Some of our cameras are moving on pre-programmed or programmed tours, so it's not like you have a still shot on a subject with control lighting. We do use some analytics tools, but we do not do facial recognition. I've had vendors probably over the years, 20 different vendors, tell us that they can do facial recognition, and we let them do a controlled pilot when they can. Just in our environment, it doesn't work, and it also raises some privacy and civil liberties concerns, I think, as well. So I think in post-event, you're always going to have people looking at video, but there are tools that can help. There's one the product is called BriefCam that compresses video activity into a much more quickly accessible space. Also things like anomaly detection, so you look at behaviors outside the baseline. I think that shows a lot more promise, like putting an object down and object up behind kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd like to add something. So coming from both imaging and the analytics side, I think we oftentimes, when you're working on the analytics side, it's too easy to ask the analytics to do all the work. So those images that we saw on TV were terrible. If you had a decent camera, maybe it wouldn't be such a problem for the analytics. So something we looked at in our lab a number of years ago was trying to make very high-resolution cameras out of commodity parts, just the same way you build a computer cluster out of commodity PCs to make a high-performance computer. You just get cheap sensors and gang them together, and you make very high resolution. And this is how it's done in drones. So those things have insane numbers of pixels. So if you had relatively inexpensive, a little more expensive than what we have, but reasonably expensive, very high resolution cameras, you'd be putting less demands on the software.
Yeah, kind of a follow-up question. A number of years ago, we did a trial in Los Angeles, and I sat in a room with a number of officers who were viewing a bank of closed-circuit TV cameras. And one of the officers points to the screen and goes, yeah, there's something going on there. And I looked at it, and the layman had no idea. And he said, yeah, I can tell because of the way this guy approached this other guy, and I've seen this guy before. And obviously that's decades of experience. The same thing for the fire chief who has a good sense of how a fire started in a building. Is that merely a function of acquiring data over decades of time? Meaning to say, now that we are recording these huge data sets, and every fire that happens, there's a record placed, and years go by, and we continue to train our machine learning algorithms, do you get to a point where we think we can compete with human intuition for some of these? I have a hunch that there's some nefarious activity going on, or is it always going to be really a human operator driving the decisions with maybe tools like BriefCam that simplify that process? Yeah, please feel free.
I think absolutely it's going to be the combination of the skilled professional with assistive tools. And the challenge to us as technologists is to find the best assistive tools as we can. I was struck we met with St. Paul Police Department after the Republican National Defense in 2008. We were trying to prosecute 600 rioters, and we sat down and saw how they were going about doing it. And they had photographs all over the place, and they would pick up on just the smallest thing, like this guy's got a blue water bottle, and then they key it, but masked, but then they would key in on that blue water bottle and then piece it together. And like, well, here he is again. Piece it all together. So I think by that intuition of like, okay, I'm going to zero in on this thing. Now that you've done that, if you could have the assistive tools that can help you then find all the people with that blue water bottle, then it makes the process go a lot quicker. And so instead of spending the 6 months or so that they did pulling together evidence to prosecute these people,
yeah, I perfectly agree with the example, and that's the point I tried to make in the presentation, that we shouldn't think that such a system will replace the human operator, but will be an assistive tool. So in the example that this particular person looked at the video 400 times, I mean, my inference was that each time was striking one individual and so on and so forth. So if you have the system and you settle there and you tell the system, okay, track this individual over hours and hours of data, this is a very well-defined problem, and the existing state-of-the-art could do a decent or successful job regarding that. So that's the one element. The other is whenever there is something specific, if the expert focuses on certain attributes of the object and things of that nature, in principle, one could teach a system to perform, become an expert system to perform similar steps, right? But having kind of a blanket statement that I will build a system that could just, again, replace the human, that's a different story. There was another point that was
Speaking of piecing things together, this was one of the first events that I can recall where public safety invited the media, the public really, to send in any images or video that had been taken. And in my mind, I'm just thinking of IT at boston.org. I mean, that email box is just filling up with these attachments. Maybe some of the JPEGs at best have some metadata that says, hopefully you can trust that the guy has this clock set right. maybe they have a GPS tag. I still don't know the view shed of the camera. Was it pointing this way? Was it pointing that way? I'm just curious from the public safety perspective, how you deal with this onslaught of incoming media, and are there analytics to the folks that are building them that could help public safety sort and organize the uploaded data?
It's something I think is going to become a challenge. We've been talking about expanding our use of social media for better engagement of the community for community policing efforts. Many departments use Twitter. We use Twitter. We have Facebook presence. If the volume of input, if the volume of tips, and like you said, the material is going to range from still photos to full motion video, it has to be reviewed because obviously it can contain critical information. So do you have to staff that up? I mean, are there tools that can help? Of course, but you're always, like we just talked about, you're always going to need a human being to look. The tool is never going to replace the person. So I think we're going to have to measure that going forward. Right now, the city's 911 system allows callers to 911 if they have a cell phone that can take a picture, they can tell the call taker, I have an image I want to upload, and they can upload that NMS image to the dispatcher, which will get sent to our fusion center. That is not heavily used right now. We did a little bit of marketing. That's something that's going to, I think, grow exponentially, especially after recent events.
So are there classification tools that might help with some of these images to determine like time of day or the the view shed? I know Microsoft had done some work on that to help determine, okay, these two images are approximately taken at the same place. It just seems like, as you say, you almost have a legal obligation to review all that evidence. So it's kind of this double-edged sword of, you're creating just a huge amount of work to sort through that, and hope that maybe some analytics could play in to help organize that.
So there are two issues. Issue number one is when we have these technologies, some of them we saw from the university, some of them what we do, and when we try to deploy this, the agencies have to invest resources to get these technologies, and then they have an expectation that I spend so much resource to use this technology, and it has to do its job. I think if we get past that issue and say these technologies are not going to solve the problem, but they can help you. I'm sure all of us use the technology for that purpose. So when we put together the video meta search, what I explained to you for a major city, they were saying, okay, we're going to invest all this resource. Why do we need that? And the first question is, how accurate is this? 90%, 100%. So I think the fundamental question we need to ask is when we adopt technology is, today what we have, is that enough for us, or can this technology help us do our job 5% better than what we're doing? If we take that attitude, technology adoption improves, and then you will see. So there are analytic tools. You can look for specific things, but like humans, even technology also has limitations. It may miss a person. So it's not always like technology or an operator. Both have to be efficient to make that work. I think we are getting there slowly, but the expectation should be somewhat set to a practical level where we can adopt such technology and think that they're like smartphone. We use that for certain purpose, but that cannot replace our social life. Right? I think we need to get to that level.
The scenario you mentioned on one hand is a great opportunity that we have the crowds providing all this information, right? But there are a good number of problems that need to be solved there, right? Just making, like in an automated fashion, finding that two images represent the same location, not knowing the location of the cameras and so on, is a problem itself. Then these cameras are not calibrated, right? So objects appear one size in one video or image, a different size in the other one. But making the association between objects, like maintaining identity, oh, this is the person, I see this. I mean, ideally, you would like to build a 3D model of the area and then be able to take each image or each video and kind of transform it appropriately and say, oh, this view, then this part of the scene, this image is from the other view, and so on and so forth. And this is a formidable task because, again, the cameras differ, we don't know the location, they're not calibrated, and so on. There is some work where they try to, people tourists submit, let's say, images from a landmark somewhere, and then technology like stitch all these images together. So, but that's a much more constrained set.
There's another important element here, and I think that is that in the minds of many members of the public, we already have all these capabilities. They think that if somebody
They've seen Minority
they've seen
Report.
those movies,
Yeah.
so I've done press conferences where we've announced new technology, and literally I've had people come afterwards and say, "Well, you guys have been doing that for years."
Sure.
So a lot of what we're fighting is the perception that the capacity is probably much more advanced. And I think in many people's minds, we do have everything we're just talking about is fully deployed internationally and available in real time.
I'd like to comment on something that is sort of related to the previous two questions, and that is there are things that algorithms are really good at and can do way better than humans, and there are things that humans are way better at. And I think the trick is how you make best use of the finite human resource you have so they get brought into the process in the optimal way. So I showed that example in my talk of finding a tank in the scene of photons. There's no way a person can do that task, period. Other tasks, humans beat the pants off. And computers are particularly good at highly repetitive tasks in huge amounts of data, and good at synthesizing huge amounts of data. So one experiment comes to mind where, for medical imaging, my colleagues at the University of Chicago showed something interesting. They gave mammograms to radiologists and asked them to make decisions about the malignant cancer. And they had computer algorithm compute things from the image. And then the people, the humans, got the same information to use for making the decision. So the people were pretty good at assessing things about the image, but when it came down to the final decision, the computer was better. Because there were a whole bunch of variables and people couldn't, even though they're experts, couldn't quite put it together. So parceling out these problems in such a way that in the end, 1 minute of video comes to an analyst, or 10 pictures, or something that a person really needs to look at.
I think that last bit is important, that it was the mirroring together of the analytic with the doctor, and maybe the analytic helped reinforce the doctor's decision. Where I'm going is, it seems like there's a potential liability problem. It's funny because we understand and appreciate that humans make mistakes, and if my doctor misdiagnoses me, I accept that happens on occasion. As those decisions maybe are made more by an analytic, do we have that same compassion for the data set or for the programmer? Or do you imagine lawsuits really across the field? I mean, public safety, medical, in enterprise, where the analytic told somebody to do something, they did it, and they were injured as a result of it.
So when I think about the flood of data that you get from a crowdsourced kind of situation that I described, there are three things that hit me: structure, integrity, and gaps. Right. So by structure, I mean, if it's truly emails piling in, if there was some way of just in terms of managing all of that information, a front end that would provide structure, right? So that someone doesn't have to be reading through the email and putting this information into this field. Just a tool to do that would be very useful. Secondly, integrity. So probably 99% of the things are coming in unaltered, but someone could be intentionally altering what they're doing, whether they're altering the location or the time, or the imagery itself. How do you assess that integrity, or do you just assume using your starting assumption that it is what it is, but you have to keep that in the investigator's mind, like, well, but maybe it isn't. And then thirdly, the filling in the gaps, right? So if the image or video isn't time stamped or location stamped, can you use media correlation techniques to fill in those gaps? As well as maybe it does have that information, but from an integrity perspective, maybe you want to validate it through some correlation with other data to see whether it's an outlier and should be disregarded.
And I mean, video information is just another tip that is one of thousands of formats of tips that we can get. You can write something on a napkin and throw it on a police desk in a police district and leave, and it'll be up to the investigators to determine the validity, see if it connects to another case. I mean, obviously there's more tools available than we just talked about if you have resources, which is another huge issue for humble public safety agencies that may not necessarily have the budgets that they'd like to have. Sustainability of existing investments is a huge issue for us too. Thousands of cameras that have to be maintained, sustainability, life cycle replacements. We don't often have the funding to look at some of the cutting edge things that the commercial sector often can afford in ways that we can't.
No, please.
No, well, Paula tells me that there's a few individuals at the back of the room that may have a question or two for the panel, and certainly invite that. Yeah, please, sir, if you could. Yeah.
Well, I had some questions. So I think for the gentleman from Motorola, so I want to, concerning your technology for retail. So do you see that the technology per se is a value for the market you're targeting, or do you serve that as a service as well?
I'm sorry, can you restate?
You mentioned a number of applications of your video analytics technology in retail.
Yes.
And those were very interesting. So what I'm asking is basically, do you provide that technology as a technology standalone, or do you provide a service around it? And what type? So that's very interesting.
Okay, so just as a first disclaimer, what I was presenting was a view of the retail industry, so I wasn't promoting or offering for sale or anything from Motorola, just to be clear. But Motorola is in the business of doing video things in public safety and retail as well. I think from our perspective, we're called Motorola Solutions for a reason. We try to provide end-to-end solutions, and so that solution then goes beyond just the underlying enabling technology, but really understanding the problem and providing an end-to-end solution. It may be offered as the product might be offered as a service that gets managed over time. Is that
the reason why I ask is because my interests are in applying advanced technologies to your product, and when you go and apply this advanced technology, then you have the problem of communicating it and packaging it in a way that the end user really appreciates it.
Right.
So that's where the question comes from. It was totally clear that you worked in R&D.
Yes. Yes. So in the public safety space, that's exactly what we're doing in video, and there's some Motorolans here who, where is Brendan O'Brien? No, he's sitting there. Who's in that business, and probably you might want to talk to him later on what we're doing in public safety. What I was explaining at the beginning is, in addition to public safety, we're exploring opportunities in retail. We don't currently have a product offering in that area, but we are pursuing creating, like I say, end-to-end solutions in that space as well.
Yeah. If I can argument the question. So you talked about a system to basically tag the inventory. So how is that competing with other type of systems, such as printed R&D identifier? It's a different technology, but it's a competitive technology. So how do you see your video analytic tagging system superior to that one?
Okay, so let me use a specific. I don't know if you're talking about the product inventory recognition kinds of. So actually, we see things like RFID and video or image analytics as actually complementary. So there's certain cases where it makes sense to stick an RFID tag on it in order to track it. For lower cost, high velocity, things that get sold quickly kinds of items, the manufacturer's not going to take the expense of putting RFID tags onto each and every bottle of Coke or whatever, right? And that's where video imaging analytics can complement that, so you can track the range of different products.
Yes, it brings up an interesting, in my mind at least, dilemma with some of the enterprise analytics, although I think it's applicable elsewhere. Obviously a lot of us have a public presence on LinkedIn or Facebook where our image is publicly available and with our name. And often, I mean, we put it up there not so that unknown people can find us, but that people who remember us from 10 years ago, oh, okay, that's the type of Kris that I remember. But it does kind of create this dilemma if when I walk into the store and there's a camera pointed at me, and that camera is mining the Facebook public profile database. The store, who doesn't know me and hasn't asked, is this okay, now knows my name, and they may know some other information about me, what I like, my age, if I'm married, et cetera, et cetera. What are the kind of ethical and legal complexities with marrying together publicly available data in a way that, I mean, no human could have ever made those ties. It's just too many. You couldn't sit down and look through a million Facebook photos and say, okay, I recognize this guy, but a computer could do that. And the same thing with automated license plate readers. I know that's been an issue for cities that set up capture devices, and they're capturing thousands of plates per day, potentially looking up some information about the vehicle. And the argument always is, well, I could have an officer on the corner, writing down these license plates, but he couldn't write down 1,000 plates, a day. And so, is this going to be a line that's drawn just because we'll continue to push it, and maybe the ACLU comes and says, okay, back off? Or are consumers in enterprise going to stop shopping at a store if they find them marrying together data that they're uncomfortable with? I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the ethical ramifications of it.
From a police perspective, International Association of Chiefs of Police actually recently published a best practices report on the use of automated license plate readers, but you're right, national best practices are still kind of being established, and of course, it's a very much an emerging field. The number one question I get related to our use of cameras is privacy issues, followed by do they work?
In retail space, if you start collecting analytics on a person who is walking in, for example, this particular individual is male, potentially 50 years old. That analytics is doesn't establish an identity with a particular individual. Just gives a general information about that. I think that is not really over the line. It's something which. But on the other hand, if you provide some convenience to you, for example. Imagine a situation that you can walk into a Starbucks and say, I want to buy a cup of coffee, and you buy that, and then they will simply say, okay, thank you very much, because they've already identified you. They can potentially bring that directly to you, and you do not have to take out your card and you need to put that there. So that's a convenience where you may, at some point in future, think that there is some value in it, and you may opt in to such programs. So the retail market space is more playing into that concept. That we are not going to simply identify people, but you will see volunteers getting into this program because it increases convenience, it increases also, it provides you better security, and you don't need to carry a card or $3 or $4 coffee. So these are all some avenues in which you see a lot more people are going to enroll into this. And of course, we see that today because if you see, I heard some statistics that you upload something like 90 million photos per day into Facebook. Let's say, if you are uploading there, that means you're kind of waiving your privacy, right? So it's a benefits versus privacy discussion.
Yeah, interestingly, a couple of days ago, there was a publication of the Northwestern also a 16-page report by ACLU about the deployment of cameras in Chicago and so on. And I guess the main idea is that the data should be used responsibly. There should be rules and regulations of how they can be used. And they shouldn't be abused used, I guess, by police or the government clearly. Yeah, they shouldn't have, for example, cameras in your backyard or your house.
Or a drone flying.
Okay. So, yeah, the rule should be clear, and then the benefit versus the cost should be weighed. And then another point is very often you can anonymize the data. So there's a video camera, but if, for example, I only pull out the trajectories of the objects, statistics, you know, the features, attitudes that could be used for forensic surgery, for this or that, or as you mentioned, like yeah, the age without touching the name is a huge risk and so on. But that's another way to see the benefit. I mean, a big issue is the privacy, right? Every time you want to put the camera inside an assisted living home, the first reaction is like, I'm going to be monitored 24/7, bedroom, right? One way around it, although it's hard to tell people that that's what's happening, is if the video data never leaves the house, and all that leaves the house is metadata, attributes, right? So there is some local processing happening, and all it goes out is, for example, there's a change in the gait of the person, or this person is flat on the floor. But, so that's another way to just take care of these concerns that people have.
But an interesting thing that's happening is with the analytics getting better, so-called anonymized data are leaky. So there have been instances where people thought they had basically anonymized the data. If you have a social network or something, all you have are the nodes. You don't know the names of the people, maybe just an ID number. But from the structure, you can work out who they are. Or a really clumsy instance from my field, in MRI brain imaging, if you want to distribute brain images for researchers who want to analyze and understand the brain, and MRI images of your head, and you typically look at it in slices, but if you stack them up and put them together and then computer render it, you see the person's face right there. So there are a lot of things you have to be careful.
I think a lot of this is going to be driven by what the public wants, because that's what we ultimately serve. So if the public expectation is we're willing to sacrifice some privacy so that you can do things like visual recognition for things like crossings, and that might be something over the years. I don't think we're there now, but in the future, maybe the perception changes. With our camera program, the public loves it. I mean, they've embraced it in a way that I think surprised all of us, to the point where originally we wanted to relocate a camera after a problem is solved in 100 days or whatever. We can't move cameras now because there's literally public outcry. They want the camera to stay where it is. So I mean, the complaints about cameras, which kind of have not surfaced since the program started in 2003.
Yeah.
We just have a few more audience questions
Sure.
before we,
Yeah.
because we have 5 minutes left, and then
Sure.
we can.
Yeah,
I had a question regarding sort of the retail use of cameras. In my digital life, I make it very hard for companies to track my activities. In the UK, there's a regulation to where when I visit a website, the website has to tell me that they're using cookies to track my activity. And I have the option to say, yes, that's okay, no, there isn't. When I go into a store, I have a reasonable expectation that a video camera will be watching me to make sure I don't shoplift, which is fine. But do retailers have a responsibility to say, okay, we're going to be filming you to improve your customer service or for commercialization purposes, to sort of, we're catching you on video for stuff beyond just public safety?
So yeah, I think you touched on this a little bit earlier in terms of a large number of the use cases are anonymous in nature, with the exception of the loyalty programs, which are something that you would typically opt in to. So you would explicitly know about the loyalty program. Otherwise, it's you know the customer insights. It's looking at sort of data in aggregate. Probably you know the borderline cases where it's customer service, which is now specifically targeted towards you, even though they don't know who you are. And I haven't seen any reports regarding whether some sort of notice is necessary there. Obviously, from a security perspective, sometimes you'll see in stores a sign that says use. I think in today's world, people sort of have an expectation that if you're in a public space, there may be cameras, whether it's out of doors or it's in buildings like this or it's in retail. Where are the cameras? Well, right now it's the one that's online right there. So I think that's kind of where it falls. I think there's a clear line of distinction though between the public space and the private space. And people don't want well, maybe some people do, but cameras in their household. But if in those cases it's their choosing to put themselves out on the web. So I think in the public space, people are accustomed to it. But it is a sticking point.
If having a city camera like that.
Right, so that becomes where it's the line between public and private is less clear, right? I mean, it's your property, so.
It just brings up the follow-up question for the city cameras.
I'm sorry, just to follow up on that. I mean, Google. Last time I checked my house on Google, I'm out in the front yard on a ladder cleaning the rain gutter.
Yeah.
You know? I'm right there.
Yeah.
In shorts and all. So.
Right. Yeah.
Your face was legally required to be blurred on that image.
They do obscure that. I noticed that there was a person with a baby stroller and her face was obscured.
They
Does
tried.
the city today mask private yards and such?
Yeah, we don't. Cameras are not private property, and we have pretty strict controls and training for our officers. First and foremost, training. Everything we do is tracked. If there's an allegation, none of it ever been sustained, but the supervisor can pull video and look at what the officer actually did, how they were controlling the camera, what they were looking at. There's a lot of controls.
There actually, I do have a question about that. There's we have very strict retention policies on the data that we collect in the public. And sort of related to that, and maybe getting to the big data piece of this talk, is 2,000 cameras in the city of Chicago collecting 1 megapixel images every 15 seconds. You're going to collect about a petabyte of data in about half a year. Do you do that?
Video is stored for between 15 and 30 days, depending on the camera. And if it's used in court, then it's considered evidence for that case.
So you can't look back further than 15 to 30 days.
Unless it's been.
And you're speaking from, is it NAVTech?
Yeah.
Any other questions in the room? Right, I think, oh, yes, please.
Do you see situations where you think maybe the technology you're throwing at a problem is too much or not the best way? I know that when I heard about Boston and the video analytics, I wondered if wouldn't it be more efficient to put a dog out there who can sniff explosives. And certainly as a data analyst, I often see people putting a lot more quantity of data when maybe a smaller, more focused approach would be back much better. Do you see this happening in your life?
Well, in this case, I'm guessing there were dogs sniffing.
Yeah.
So it's you've got multiple tools at your disposal. There's always, as technologists, there's very focused technologists. There's always that risk that we're like, oh, computer vision is the solution for all problems. But I think you have to look at what's the most cost-effective solution to do it. In some cases, a single simple sensor might do the trick.
Actually, there's an interesting study that Dr. Nancy Lewin at the Urban Institute did. If you want to Google it, you'll find it, where she does a cost-benefit analysis on the use of camera. She looks at Chicago, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. And the thing with the marathon was that it was a pre-planned event, so you would have dogs out there because you don't have the event. Cameras can be ready for unplanned events as well. You potentially always have that capability running.
Okay, well, I wonder if in conclusion, each one of our presenters could just maybe take a minute or so to give us your vision for the next 3 to 5 years in video analytics. Is there applications for more home use? Can I hold my hand up to my webcam, we look at the skin color and say, hey, I should go see the doctor, those sorts of things. Yeah.
Well, I'm not the video analytics guy, so I'll let John take that one.
Well, I mean, for us, I look at this in three phases of camera maturity for us. The first was installing a lot of cameras. The second was integrating those cameras together, federating them so that they run in a lot of places. Third stage, which is the stage we're in right now and is not mature yet, is analytics. So I think in the future, based on the public's appetite for issues that we talked about, you'll see much more advanced, much more automated anomaly detection.
So there's a lot of different ways to answer this question. I think one thing that I'll put out there is the use of 3D sensing. I think with the Microsoft Kinect gaming system, right, people have gotten used to that technology. And what it's done is it's really driven the cost curve down. So those kinds of sensors, where they used to cost thousands of dollars now, a small component, and they're getting miniaturized so they can be put in devices. So I think the availability of those low-cost sensors has really been picked up in the university setting. You can go on YouTube and see all sorts of interesting college experiments on what you can do with those kinds of sensors. And I think what we'll see is the use of those sensors moving beyond just the gaming that they're currently in to, for example, natural user interfaces. One of the things that Microsoft has in mind in its future. But also seeing the use of 3D sensors in various verticals to solve specific customer problems. I think that'll be interesting to see how this happens.
Aggelos, what will your lab be working on in 3 to 5 years?
Oh, various things, but as I was mentioning in the presentation, one of the issues is to really take the successful technology from the lab to real life. That's one of the issues. Abnormal events is certainly something of interest. I mean, from the Boston tragedy, there was this image video where everybody's scared and the perpetrator is cool and like nothing's happening. So that's an abnormal event if you look at facial recognition and so on. I mean, coming to the home environment, we're doing work, for example, where we can be trained by a web interface to learn Cmdr. The video it watches the frequency of suppression, the depth, and so on. So or some other work we're doing where for drug adherence, you put the camera inside the cup of the bottle and you can evaluate if the person is taking the drug. That nature. We're doing some work where using millimeter technology, we can tell from a distance if the heart rate of the person changes to determine intent, for example, of the person, and so on. And then as far as the home, the last comment is, it comes to mind, there's some work out of MIT Media Labs where you can, with a video camera, visible light, detect the small changes. So you see a person that without processing, you see nothing, and then after processing, you see the blood pulsating. And we can look at the veins, we can get the heart rate, things of that nature. So the possibilities are endless, but by and large, very little application, once you've seen very little application of these technologies into real life, as was mentioned.
Kris, what's NEC's vision of the future with regard to video?
Well, when we look at the amount of data which is coming today, the evolution and mobility, we are investing a lot of our resources on analytics and big data initiatives, primarily because these are data from different types of sources. Some are trustworthy, like mounted camera. So we want to look at how do we do this data mining and get some useful information. Not just for public safety, we are also looking at the customer experience, how we improve experience. And when we do this, the public will see the natural benefits of convenience, the biometrics and analytics, and hopefully they will acknowledge the credit to public safety. These technologies will help us do that. So we are focusing more on doing more analytics as well as recognition, biometrics.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to thank all of you for attending this afternoon, giving up your lunch hour, and of course, I'd like to thank our 5 panelists for joining us and sharing with us a glimpse into video analytics in the wild.